So what are we going to talk about?
You cry the whole night through.
What about identification? How identification, or we identifying with something, makes the content be solid.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel that when there is a information coming up, how the brain can, when it takes it, and then it identifies, then it makes it his thought. And we don't see that process, that we identify.
If we don't identify, what do we experience?
David Bohm. It seems to me this question of identification is the main one. It is very subtle. In spite of all that you have said, identification still goes on. K. Of course. DB. It seems to be built into us. Questioner. And this raises a question whether that identification can be ended, if I understood rightly. DB. Identification prevented listening freely, openly, because one listens through the identification. K. What does identification mean? Why do human beings identify themselves with something? My car, my house, my wife, my children, my country, my God, my... You follow? Why? Q. To be something, perhaps. K. Let's inquire why. I identify not only with outward things, but also inwardly with my experience. I identify with experience and say, this is my experience. Why do human beings go through this all the time? DB. At one stage, you said we identify with our sensations. For example, our senses, and this seems very powerful. What would it be not to identify with our sensations? K. When I listen, am I listening to identify myself with the fact? Or is there no identification at all, and therefore listening with a totally different ear? Am I hearing with the ears of my hearing, or am I hearing with total attention? Am I listening with total attention, or is my mind wandering off and saying, oh my goodness, this is rather boring? Can I attend so completely that there is only the act of listening and nothing else? No identification, no saying, yes, that is a good idea, bad idea, that's true, that's false, which are all processes of identification. But without any of those movements, can I listen? When I do so listen, then what? The truth that thought is the essence of the self, and the self creates all this misery, is finished. I don't have to meditate. I don't have to practice. It is over when I see the danger of these things. Can we listen so completely that there is the absence of the self, and one says, can I see, observe something without the self, which is my country, I love that sky, it is a beautiful sky, and all the rest of that. The ending of thought, which is the ending or cutting at the very, very root of the self, a bad simile, but take that. When there is such active, attentive, non-identifying attention, then does the self exist? I need a suit. Why should there be identification in getting a suit? I get it. There is getting it. So the active listening implies listening to the senses, to my taste, the whole sensory movement. I mean, you can't stop the senses, then you would be paralyzed. But the moment I say, that's a marvelous taste, I must have more of that, begins the whole identification. DB. It seems to me that that is the general condition of mankind, to be identifying with the senses. Now, how are we going to change that? K. That is the whole problem, sir. Mankind had been educated, conditioned for millennia, to identify with everything. My guru, my house, my God, my country, my king, my queen, and all the horror that goes on. DB. You see, with each one of those, there is a sensation. K. It is a sensation, which you call experience. When there is the ending of the self, what takes place? Not at the end of my life, not when the brain becomes deteriorated, when the brain is very, very active, quiet, alive, when that takes place, when the self is not? Now, how can you find out, sir? Say X has ended the self completely, not picks it up in the future, another day, but ends it completely. He says, yes, there is a totally different activity which is not the self. What good is that to me, or to any of us? He says, yes, it can end. It is a different world altogether, different dimension. Not a sensory dimension, not an intellectual projected dimension, something totally different. I say he must either be a cuckoo, a charlatan, or a hypocrite. But I want to find out, not because he says so, but I want to find out. Can I, as a human being, living in this tremendously ugly, brutal, violent world, economically, socially, morally, and all the rest of it, live without the self? I want to find out. And I want to find out not as an idea. I want to do it. It's my passion. Then I begin to inquire, why is there identification with the form, with the name? It is not very important whether you are K or W or Y. So you examine this very, very carefully, not to identify yourself with anything, with sensation, with ideas, with a country, with an experience. You understand, sir? Can you do it? Not vaguely and occasionally, but with passion, with intensity, to find out. Then what place has thought? You understand, sir? What place has thought? Has it any place at all? Obviously, when I am talking, I am using words. The words are associated with memory, and so on, and so on. So there is thinking there, not with me. There is very little thinking as I am talking. Don't let's go into that. So thought has a place. When I have to catch a train, when I have to go to the dentist, when I go to do something, thought has its place. But it has no place psychologically as when there is the identifying process taking place, right? I wonder if you see. DB, you are saying it is identification that makes thought do all the wrong things. K, that's right. Identification has made thought do the wrong things. DB, it would be all right otherwise. K, otherwise thought has its place. DB, but when you say no identification, you mean the self is empty, that it has no content, doesn't it? K, there are only sensations. DB, sensations, but they are not identified. They are just going on. Do you mean? K, yes, sensations are going on. DB, outside or inside? K, inside. GN, and you are also implying there is no slipping back. K, of course not. When you see something most dangerous, you don't slip back or go forward. It is dangerous. Sir, then is that death? That is the question we began with. Is there a living with the sensations fully awakened? They are awakened, they are alive, but the non-identifying with sensation deprives, wipes away the self. We said that. Is it possible to live a daily life with death, which is the ending of the self? The moment you have an insight, It is finished. DB. Would you say the insight transforms the person? K. The insight transforms not only the state of the mind, but the brain cells themselves undergo a change. DB. Therefore, the brain cells, being in a different state, behave differently. It is not necessary to repeat the insight. K. Either it is so or it is not so. I am left with this now. I am left with the question of what is death? Is the ending of the self death? Death in the ordinary accepted sense of the word? Is it not obviously because the blood is circulating, the brain is working, the heart is pumping, and all the rest of it? DB. It is still alive. K. It is alive, but the self is non-existent because there is no identification of any kind. This is a tremendous thing. Non-identification with anything, with experience, with belief, with a country, with ideas, with ideals, wife, husband, love, no identification at all. Is that death? People who call that death say, "My God, if I don't identify myself with my something or other, why, I am nothing." So they are afraid of being nothing. Then identify. But nothingness is not a thing. You understand, sir? Not a thing. Therefore, it is quite a different state of mind. Now, that is death, while there is living, breathing, sensations, the heart beating, the blood circulating, the brain active, undamaged. But our brains are damaged. DB. Can this damage be healed? Is it possible to heal the damage? K. Insight. That is what I want to get at. Our brains are damaged. For thousands of years we have been hurt psychologically, inwardly, and that hurt is part of our brain cells, remembered hurts. The propaganda for 2,000 years that I am a Christian, that I believe in Jesus Christ, which is a hurt, or I am a Buddhist. You follow, sir? That is a hurt. So our brains are damaged. To heal that damage is to listen very carefully, to listen, and in the listening, to have an insight into what is being said. And therefore, there is immediately a change in the brain cells. Therefore, there is no identification, complete and total. Do you see the truth that identification is the root of the self, with thought and all the rest of it? That is an absolute fact, like a cobra, like a dangerous animal, like a precipice, like taking deadly poison. So there is no identification absolutely when you see the danger. Then what is my relationship to the world, to nature, to my woman, man, child? When there is no identification, is there indifference, callousness, brutality? Do I say, I don't identify, and put my nose in the air? I am asking, sir, is this non-identification an ideal, a belief, an idea which I am going to live with, and therefore my relationship to the dog, to the wife, to the husband, to the girl, or whatever, it becomes very superficial, casual. It is only when identification is absolutely cut out of one's life that there is no callousness, because then relationship is real. you.